In this New World Beginner Guide, I'm going to give you a ton of information that will help you get off to the best possible start when the game launches this fall. Having played some 180 hours in the closed beta, I have learned quite a few things that aren't inherently obvious, and if known early on can save you quite a bit of trouble. Let's get into what these are. After completing the brief tutorial in New World, you begin on the beach doing some basic quests that'll give you basic gear and introduce you to very basic mechanics. There are some things you can do here even this early to get off to a good start, so let's go through these now. Make sure that you have some healing food at all times. You likely won't have to craft much right away since you can find some from chests as you quest, but you will always want to make sure you've eaten and that you are regaining health. It's very difficult to quest the New World without food because you don't regain health naturally otherwise, and you will eventually die from enemies unless you have health potions, which are not so easy to come by right at the beginning. Food lasts about 20 minutes or so make sure you refresh it about that often. You can craft more at campfires if you need to, and there are boars not too far away you can hunt for meat. Another good tip is to slot a life staff on your second bar so that you can heal yourself when needed. Without many points invested in focus, your heals won't be strong, but they can still be enough to keep you going without having to use valuable potions that should only be used in emergencies. You don't lose anything by using it either since you split XP between two weapons if they are both used in combat, and if you don't use it in combat, then all the XP will go to your primary weapon. You can swap your primary weapon when you want to try something new and funnel all XP to it by healing between combat encounters. Make sure you press Control when casting to target yourself. One important thing to learn early on in New World is how to recognize what enemies are weak to what damage types. This is a fundamental of New World combat that will make things much easier for you, and there aren't so many enemy types that you can't remember which are which. Enemies near the beginning of New World, specifically Drowned, are resistant to piercing damage, are neutral to slashing damage, and are weak to blunt and nature damage. This means you want to avoid using a spear, rapier, musket, or bow against them if possible. These weapons are excellent, however, at killing animals, which you will need to do from time to time for quests, so it's not a bad idea to take along different weapons that have different damage types. The sword is great for questing because its light attack and whirling blade are slash damage, but its heavy attack, reverse stab, and leaking strike abilities are all thrust damage. This allows you to change damage types while using the same weapon. You can tell if an enemy is resistant to your damage type by the blue numbers and down arrows that appear when attacking them. If the numbers are white, then the damage type you're dealing is neither good nor bad, and if the numbers are yellow with up arrows, then they are weak to that damage type. Orange numbers represent a critical hit regardless of whether they are resistant or not to the damage type you're using. Striking enemies in the back will always guarantee a critical hit, so try to attack there when possible, especially when opening combat. As you gain skill points for your weapon, I strongly recommend prioritizing active abilities over passive ones initially, as this will give you skills to use in combat right away. Although there are some excellent passive skills, if you select them first, you will only have light and heavy attack to use in combat, which can be tedious and boring. Try out different active abilities first, find the ones you like, and disregard the others. You can respec for free until level 20, so don't be shy about playing around with them. Another thing to point out is that attacks and abilities can hit any target they touch, though the hitboxes for each are different. Hitting multiple enemies with attacks and finding abilities that can hit many enemies at once is the key to success when outnumbered. Learn the hitboxes of your attacks and abilities so you can maximize their performance in combat. Many abilities can hit far more enemies than it would appear if you position yourself correctly. Some great weapons for AoE early on are the Great Axe, Hammer, and Sword. Use these weapons to mow down as many enemies as you can handle at once after you've grouped them all up, or accidentally pulled more than you wanted to. Crafting is a huge part of New World and one that can be a bit overwhelming near the beginning of the game, though it's a lot of fun. New World handles crafting really well, but there are some things you should know. It's a good idea to craft yourself iron crafting tools once you've made it to the first town and done a few quests. These allow you to gather materials about 30% or so faster than the flint tools you should have from the main quest line. You can craft these at the workshop if you have enough materials, and this includes iron ingots and coarse leathers, which are not needed for the flint tools. The easiest way to get these is in a mountainous area that have the wolf icons on the map, as these have both iron and wolves, and you can gain the coarse leather from skinning. You'll want to continue to upgrade your tools to steel as soon as you get high enough level because these increase your gathering speed by a further 120%. This is a massive jump in gathering speed, and it will make gathering go much faster, saving you tons of time. Keep an eye out on the trading post to see if there are any steel tools you can get for your level. Note that you by default only search the current town's trading post when browsing, but you can change this to view all towns to see where you might be able to purchase some. You will have to travel there to buy them, however. One thing to note about the resource nodes in New World, these are things like iron deposits, hemp, and even plants like Lifebloom, is that they all respawn in the same locations. This means if you find a good spot to farm these, then you can use them over and over to gather the desired materials. Sometimes it's better to camp out certain nodes than it is to keep exploring for more that you may never find. Many areas of materials also have multiple nodes all close together, varying in sizes from larger ones yielding more materials. When you see clumps together, try to harvest the largest first in case other players come by. You don't want to be in the middle of harvesting the smallest node when someone comes and takes the large one. That can be extremely frustrating. You want to aim to get your logging, mining, harvesting, and tracking and skinning up to 50 fairly quickly if you plan to craft much in New World. This will allow you to collect most nodes you see in the early goings of the game, and it's important to gather materials as you quest, otherwise you will get to certain areas of the game and you will not have high enough skill to gather them. This will force you back to the earlier areas of the game just to gather materials, which is inefficient. Of all the gathering skills, logging will take you by far the longest, and you'll likely have to spend some time actively trying to increase it compared with other gathering skills. Make sure you do, or you won't be able to gather mature trees, which are much more prevalent in later zones. Another tip that can make things a lot easier for you when gathering materials and just in general is increasing your carry weight limit. You begin the game with 200, but you can increase this with bags. Once you hit level 10, you'll be able to equip your first bag, and you can either purchase one from the trading post or you can craft one at the outfitting station in any town. As you reach certain levels, you unlock more and more bag slots, so be sure to equip more and more of these as you go. Not all bags are created equal, and you can craft or purchase from the trading post ones that provide a lot more carry weight than others. Try to get the best ones you can. In order to make one, you'll need coarse leather, linen, iron ingots, and a minor rune of holding. Linen is found from hemp plants and then refined at a loom, while the minor rune of holding can be purchased from your faction representative. You'll need tokens from doing faction quests and 1,000 gold to buy one, which isn't cheap. I highly advise trying to purchase one off the trading post first, if you can, but craft one if none are available. There are crafting quests found on the town notice board that you can use to spend your materials on to help you level up, as well as gain XP in things like weaponsmithing and armoring, without just mass-producing some weapon or armor that are then wasted. Make sure to check the board whenever you're in town and absolutely grab these quests. Many times you can produce the required item instantly with the materials you have, which is great. One of the biggest inconveniences you'll face in New World is how long it can take you to get from one place to another, and you cannot fast travel at any time you want. Instead, you can only fast travel from town to town, which costs you Azoth, a resource required for fast travel and some crafting, and it's hard to come by near the beginning of the game. For this reason, it is important that you check into an inn as well as purchase a home as quickly as possible. You can recall to your home every few hours depending on what tier of home you purchased. This will likely be the lowest tier because you won't have much gold at the beginning of the game, so you'll only be able to use it every 4 hours or so. However, even the lowest tier can help you save Azoth and valuable time running long distances. You can also spend Azoth to reset its cooldown, which is usually much cheaper than outright fast traveling from your current town to the one that your home is in. As you reach higher levels, you can purchase 2 more homes, so make sure you do, and make sure they are all in separate towns so you can fast travel to a few different places more easily. The further you have to fast travel, the more Azoth it costs, so don't put them all in territories right next to one another, but instead try to spread them out a bit if you can. Note, make sure your inn is not in the same town as any of your houses for best results. The last thing to mention here is that your current weight affects your Azoth fast travel costs, so make sure you store things in your storage first, or salvage what weapons and armor you don't need to reduce the cost of fast travel. Azoth is primarily obtained by completing quests and by fighting off corruptions on the landscape, but you can also get some from enemies or purchasing some on the trading post, though it's quite expensive. It's best to plan your activities out and try to keep to one area until you gain a good amount of Azoth to fast travel without worrying. Not being able to fast travel can be really frustrating, and you don't want that. Another great way to gain a steady source of Azoth once you get a little bit higher level is to use tools that have a chance to reward Azoth when used. Usually this is like a 40% chance, and if you have this on all your tools, then whenever you chop wood, mine ore, gather herbs, or skin an animal, you'll be gaining Azoth. It's only 1 Azoth granted, but this adds up over time by simply doing things you'd normally do anyway. The best way to get tools with this trait on them is the trading post, though you won't be able to do this right away. Another tip is that you should get in the habit of constructing a camp once you've unlocked it before you enter an area you plan to do some quests in, or you are worried might be too difficult. You cannot construct one of these in areas typically, so you'll need to move just outside the edge of these areas and place one there. This will allow you to respawn there if you die, saving you a lot of time in running back. Additionally, when you want to turn in your quest from a certain area that is reasonably far away from the corresponding town, you can dead spawn in town, saving yourself a long run. It will cost you some durability on your equipment, but these can be repaired easily and it's rather inexpensive. To do this, hit escape and hit the respawn button in the top right hand corner of the screen and select the town where your quests are located to spawn in. If you place your camp down as I just noted and then you need to head back to the same quest area again, which can happen sometimes, you can dead spawn at your camp, saving you the run back the other direction. Make sure to keep some flint always handy in your inventory so you can always make a camp. Lumber is rather easy to forage quickly almost anywhere, but finding flint can take some time. Once you reach level 9 or 10, you'll be able to join one of the New World's 3 factions, Syndicate, Marauders, and Covenant. You don't have to join one, but if you don't, you won't be able to engage in PvP nor join a company, which are the equivalent of guilds in other MMOs. Choosing which faction to join is a big decision and one that is only changeable once every 120 days, so make sure you are certain before selecting one. Additionally, you can only have one character per server, so you cannot make another character without deleting the one you currently have, which you may not want to do. The main differences between these factions are their motivations and themes, the cosmetic style of their armor, and the bonuses on the gear their faction vendor sells. This is on top of the people you'll be fighting with and against in PvP, so make sure your friends pick the same one. You can still do expeditions with players of other factions, however, so keep that in mind. If you want to get really min-max with your character, I suggest looking at what the bonuses on the gear of each faction are before selecting one. There are a few different ways to PvP in New World, but as a new player you should really only concern yourself with open world PvP or PvP that occurs out on the New World map outside of towns. You'll eventually get into a war or two, but that likely won't be right away unless you're lucky. In order to trigger PvP, you'll need to be in a town and flag up for it, at which point you'll have a short invulnerability timer that triggers once you get far enough away from town. Once that expires, you can be damaged and you can attack other flagged PvP players. You cannot attack flagged players unless you yourself are flagged. Note that you cannot be in the same group with other players who are not PvP flagged, which is important because if you run out to do an expedition and forget that you're flagged but your friends are not, then you'll have to run all the way back to town and unflag first, which can be really annoying. The first thing to understand about PvP is that level isn't so important at lower levels, however, it can give you an idea if other players have more weapon skills than you, and that can be problematic. Weapon skills matter far more in PvP than actual player level unless you are way higher than your target, in which case you will take way more damage. Enemies don't give you all that much level experience in New World, but they do give you weapon skill point experience that you will need to be more effective in combat. For this reason, if you want to have a chance in PvP, you should work on killing enemies with weapons you intend to use. If you're going for best results, stick to 2 weapons and really grind out some skill points. As I mentioned earlier, gaining active skills first before selecting passive ones is important so that you can burst down opponents and enemies. In PvP, particularly at lower levels, you will often fight someone and they will begin to run away when they are close to death. This will happen over and over, so gaining a gap closer skill is key to being able to catch your prey, or get away if you're the one in trouble. Charge is a good example of one, and you can use this to get in range or to chase down a fleeing enemy. Additionally, locking enemies down even before they can flee is also good. You can do this by using skills that knock them down, stun them, or even just slow them. This allows you to keep up the pressure preventing their escape. Area of effect attacks are also very, very important, especially in mid to larger battles, so make sure you have at least 1 or 2 that hit multiple enemies. When you and a teammate or 2 unleash your AoEs at the same time on a group of enemies, you'll often get many kills, and they are usually easier to land than regular attacks. Remember to swap weapons and use the skills on both weapon bars while in PvP, and to use any that come off cooldown as quickly as you can. This is often the difference between winning and losing. Healing is also a huge factor, so make sure you have a food buff on and have some potions before engaging in PvP, or better yet, get a healer to play with you. Healing is very, very strong in New World, and it can allow you to win where you would likely die, especially if you are geared properly. Figuring out which equipment to use in New World might seem complicated, but it is really pretty straightforward. Once you've decided on the weapons you want to use, then you'll need to worry about armor. You're not restricted to a certain armor type in New World, and you can use any armor you wish, whether it's light, medium, or heavy, or a combination of all 3. The main thing to understand is how armor weight affects your damage and your dodges. When you're lightweight, you gain plus 20% damage and your dodges are most effective. The trade-off is that you'll take more damage since your armor is not as strong. Generally, in PvE, players either go light if they are DPSing, or light in PvP if they want the mobility to escape attacks more easily. Medium weight provides you with a less effective dodge, but more effective than heavyweight, and increases your damage by 10%. Oftentimes, players who like heavy armor to stay alive but like a little extra damage will try to stay just under the heavyweight threshold in order to maximize protection while getting the extra 10% damage. Heavyweight provides you with no extra damage bonus, and your dodge is really bad, meaning you should not use it. Generally, tanks and melee characters go heavy to minimize the amount of damage they take both in PvE and PvP. If you're charging into the middle of a group of enemies or players, you better be sure you aren't going to die if they hit you. Don't be afraid to play around with different armor combinations when you're just starting out and see what you like most. You want to try and match the bonuses on your armor to your attribute setup. That is to say, if you have a strength scaling weapon, then you want strength ideally on your armor, or maybe strength and constitution for some HP. Look for other passive bonuses for the type of weapon you are using, or just generally good bonuses like ones that improve your defense or reduce cooldowns so you can use your skills more often. If your armor or weapon has a gem slot, you can slot one into it for added benefit. You can find these from gathering ore and refining the gems you find. You can sometimes get these as drops from enemies as well, or you can purchase them from the trading post. Note that you can't remove gems from slots, but you can override them later if you don't like the current gem you have. That's it for our beginner guide, and I hope you learned something or a lot of somethings and you're able to take what you learned and get a really good start to New World. I don't know which server I'll be playing on at live release yet, but I'll post it in the description as soon as I know, so check there if you want to come play on the same server as me. I'll be streaming on Twitch during the open beta and at launch, so come drop by and be sure to bookmark the New World Wiki if you have questions about the game. So what did you guys think about our New World Beginner Guide? Did it help you get a lot of information that you wouldn't have otherwise known? If you have other questions about the game, feel free to ask questions in the comments and I'll try and answer whatever I can.